There's a quiet moment that almost no one talks about. It doesn't happen during a meltdown in a grocery store. It doesn't happen when a child is crying loudly or acting out. It happens later, after the noise settles. When a parent notices something small but meaningful, a child pauses, breathes, and instead of exploding or shutting down, they try to name what they're feeling. Not perfectly, not confidently, but intentionally. Most people think emotional regulation is about control, about stopping emotions, about making children calmer, quieter, more manageable. Psychology tells a very different story. For parents who truly teach emotional regulation, the goal is not obedience. It's safety. These parents are not trying to raise children who never feel anger, fear, or sadness. They're raising children who don't feel afraid of those emotions. And that distinction changes everything. Here's what's important to understand from the beginning. Emotional regulation is not something children are born knowing how to do. The brain learns it through co-regulation, through repeated experiences of being emotionally met by someone calmer, steadier, and present. So parents who teach emotional regulation are not perfect parents. They're regulated parents, or parents actively learning to be. Psychologically, this means something very specific. They understand that when a child is overwhelmed, the child is not being difficult. The child is being dysregulated. And dysregulation is not corrected with punishment. It's corrected with connection. In early childhood, this looks subtle. A parent who gets down to the child's level, who names the feeling before correcting the behavior, who says, "I see you're frustrated," before saying, "We can't do that." This may look small, but neurologically, it's powerful. Because every time a parent names a feeling calmly, the child's brain learns to associate emotions with understanding instead of danger. Over time, the nervous system begins to organize itself around that safety. This is how regulation is built, not through lectures, not through discipline alone, but through repeated emotional attunement. These parents also tend to tolerate discomfort, their own. They allow crying without rushing to silence it. They allow anger without shaming it. They allow fear without minimizing it. This doesn't mean they allow harmful behavior. It means they separate feeling from action. Psychology calls this emotional differentiation, and it's a skill many adults never learn themselves, which is why teaching emotional regulation often requires parents to confront their own upbringing. Many of these parents grew up in environments where emotions were ignored, dismissed, or punished. So when their child expresses big feelings, something activates inside them. An urge to stop it quickly, an urge to fix, an urge to shut it down. Teaching regulation means resisting that urge. It means staying present long enough for the emotion to move through instead of being suppressed. As children grow into the school-age years, this parenting style begins to show its deeper effects. These children still feel strong emotions. They still get upset. They still struggle, but they recover faster. They are more likely to pause instead of panic, more likely to talk instead of act, more likely to seek support instead of isolating. Psychologically, this happens because their nervous system has learned something crucial, that emotions are temporary. That connection remains available even during distress. That being overwhelmed does not mean being abandoned. This becomes even more important during adolescence. Teenagers raised with emotional regulation don't suddenly stop needing guidance, but they internalize the regulating voice of their parent. When they feel flooded, they may hear an inner echo. Slow down, breathe, name what's happening. This is not accidental. Neuroscience shows that repeated co-regulation in childhood becomes self-regulation in adolescence and adulthood. The parent's calm becomes the child's internal structure. But there is a common misconception here. People assume emotionally regulated children are always emotionally expressive, always articulate, always emotionally mature. That's not true. What sets them apart is not emotional performance. It's emotional recovery. They don't fear emotions the way others might. They don't confuse feeling with failure. They don't interpret distress as something shameful. This has profound effects in adulthood. Adults who were taught emotional regulation tend to approach relationships differently. They're less reactive, less defensive, less likely to confuse intensity with intimacy. They can tolerate difficult conversations without shutting down or exploding. They can sit with discomfort without needing immediate resolution, not because they're emotionally superior, but because their nervous system learned early that emotions are survivable. Another important psychological aspect of these parents is how they model repair. They apologize when they overreact. They name their own emotions without burdening the child. They show that regulation is not perfection, it's accountability. This teaches children something critical, that emotional mistakes don't end relationships. They invite repair. This is how secure attachment deepens. Children raised this way don't grow up believing love is conditional on emotional performance. They don't feel pressure to be easy to be loved. They don't learn to suppress themselves to maintain connection. Instead, they learn balance, expression with responsibility, emotion with awareness, boundaries with compassion. It's also important to acknowledge the cost of this kind of parenting. Teaching emotional regulation is slow. It's repetitive. It often feels invisible. There are no immediate rewards, just small, quiet moments that add up over years. Moments where a child chooses words over actions. Moments where a pause replaces an outburst. Moments where connection survives discomfort. And perhaps the most important psychological truth of all is this. Parents who teach emotional regulation are not raising emotionally easy children. They're raising emotionally capable humans. Humans who can feel deeply without being overwhelmed. Who can connect without losing themselves. Who can experience emotions without fearing them. This doesn't mean these children won't struggle. It means they won't struggle alone, even inside their own minds. Because long after the parent is no longer physically present, the regulation remains as an inner steadiness, a familiar calm, a sense that emotions can be held without being feared. And that is one of the quietest, most enduring gifts a parent can give. Not control, not silence, but emotional safety that lasts a lifetime.